Hello, my name is Michael Godfrey, and I'm a Senior Customer Engineer at Microsoft. Today we're going to look at Azure ARC integration for Azure Stack HCI. Here you can see in Windows Admin Center, I'm in my normal dashboard, and I can see all the relevant things I would do as a Fabric Administrator of an Azure Stack HCI cluster. I can see the status of my servers, drives, virtual machines, the volumes, and all this information locally in Windows Admin Center. But imagine I want to start looking at things through Azure ARC, through the Azure portal. So the first thing I have to do is register my cluster in to Azure Stack HCI. This is the very first step you have to take when managing an Azure Stack HCI cluster. And you'll see that now in the new version of 21H2, you see that Azure ARC integration is enabled. Jumping back over to the portal, we can now see in Azure ARC, we can see this Azure Stack HCI under infrastructure. Going into this, you'll see that we can now interface with our cluster directly. I can see my nodes are connected. I can see information about those nodes, Lenovo SE350, and see the hardware information about those. I can then jump into capabilities and start integrating my cluster in with Azure Log Analytics. Once I've connected to a Log Analytics workspace, I can then take advantage of Azure ARC integration tools like monitoring, update management, inventory, and more. So diving into monitoring, we can look into the monitoring capabilities of this cluster, and we can see very similar information to what we just saw in Windows Admin Center. You can see the drive status, our validation report, failure, CPU, memory, and so forth. And you see it's a very, very similar output to what we would see in Windows Admin Center. The difference is in Azure ARC, I can see multiple clusters at one time. You'll see more of this when we do our monitoring dive in a subsequent video. So as we're looking here, we can see very quickly the status of our HCI cluster from an overview. We can then dive into individual server nodes and start looking at things like update management, inventory, and change tracking because we've integrated in with Azure ARC. So we'll dive into update management and we can see the status of our node to see if we need to go through and apply cluster aware updating through the Azure Update tool or through cluster aware updating in Windows Admin Center. Your choice, right? Right now, I'm fully patched, so we're good to go. We can then see if I'm adhering to policies, if I'm compliant. Oh, looks like I'm not compliant, that there's a security baseline that I'm not applying that I need to go and take care of. And if I follow the steps in Security Center, I can take advantage of that. We can then take advantage of inventory and change tracking information through Azure Automation. And so you can quickly see how I onboarded a node to Azure ARC and how I can manage this cluster no matter where it is in the world. Going back to how this process would work, you need to be running Azure Stack HCI 21H2 or above and the latest Windows Admin Center 2103.2. Doing so, you'll see that once you register your cluster, you'll see that Azure ARC integration is enabled by default. If you started with a 20H2 cluster, you will need to upgrade that to 21H2 and then re-register that cluster in to see this Azure ARC integration. You can also see the Azure ARC integration individually on your nodes by going to Windows Admin Center and going to a server management. So we'll dive into node 2 of my cluster and open up the settings for that. Once the settings loads up, you will see this Azure ARC for servers setting. And if you're not signed into Azure, you'll be prompted to sign into Azure portal. Once you're signed in, you will go through the steps of connecting it. I'm already connected and we're connected to our resource group. So we're good to go. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Azure ARC for Azure Stack HCI. Thank you so much.